In today's experiment, we're going to be determining the amount of acetic acid in a sample of vinegar. In order to do this, we're going to be performing an experimental technique called a titration. A titration uses a piece of glassware called the burette that needs to be rinsed out thoroughly before use. To rinse out the burette, I wash the walls with deionized water, pour them out, and then flush the tip. I repeat this rinsing process with my titrant, sodium hydroxide. Then I will fill up the burette with sodium hydroxide. Now I'm going to prepare my sample of vinegar for titration. I take a small amount of vinegar, approximately 5 milliliters in this case, and then I'm going to add in 2 drops of an indicator called phenolphthalein. Phenolphthalein changes colors whenever we switch from acidic to basic. It goes from a clear, colorless solution to a light pink whenever we hit a basic solution. That tells us we've used up all the acid. To make it easier to see my color change, I'm going to add in approximately 40 milliliters of water from a graduated cylinder and give it a good swirl. Then I will begin my titration. And in my titration, I know the molarity of my sodium hydroxide solution, so I can use the burette to measure the volume. Once I've measured the volume and I know the molarity, I can calculate the moles of hydroxide and thus the moles of acetic acid in my vinegar sample. Note during the titration that you spin the stopcock while you swirl the flask. And as you approach the end of the titration, you'll start to see faint notes of pink appear in your titration flask. Continue this titration process until you've reached the end of your titration. You'll know that you've reached the end of your titration when that faint pink color sticks around the flask for approximately 35 to 60 seconds. A good way to make sure that you have a faint pink solution instead of a clear colorless one is to use a piece of white paper as your background. It very clearly shows whether you have a clear colorless solution or any presence of color at hand.